Hey guys, and welcome to LBB 91 Coaching. We are on part two of our attachment styles, and today we are talking about behaviors. Yes, if you are somebody who has been in a relationship and you just didn't understand their behavior, maybe they were just so clingy and you just didn't get it why they were so on top of you, or maybe you dated somebody and they were just so distant from you, like they were cold, or there were times where they wanted to be loving you, and then sometimes they wanted to be clingy, and you just couldn't understand the randomness, or maybe you dated somebody and actually, the person was really calm, collected, and just seemed to be perfect. But you just didn't understand how come they were able to do it and you weren't able to do it. Well, today we're talking to you again about attachment styles, and we're going to be breaking down the behaviors of the four main attachment styles. There is secure, there is anxious, preoccupied, there is dismissive, and there is fearful, avoidant. We're going to break it down today, and we're going to give you some of the behaviors that are attached to these particular attachment styles. Now, I want to be very clear. Now, all behaviors don't always have to be linked into one box. There are sometimes people who are able to have different sets of behaviors because, again, environment and how you grew up and what you've learned. But majority of the time, these particular behaviors are set for those particular attachment styles. So let's get into the video. Before we do, like it, share, subscribe, click on that wonderful bell button for the notifications of the uploads. Well, let me get my fabulous friend up here who I love and appreciate. It's my fabulous PowerPoint. So we're going to start with fearful avoidance. Fearful avoidance, as we said in part one, are young, I say young, but are people who grew up in households where there was a lot of chaos. So there was turmoil, chaos. There was oftentimes an unstable environment where the parent was both the comforter and the abuser. And abuse, again, is a wide word that can be used as being emotionally neglected, or a child who has been verbally abused by being shouted at, accosted, and shut down in those particular aspects. So a child growing up in that particular household was finding that the parent was unpredictable, and therefore they had no real solutions to deal with the parent because the parent was good, bad, whatever. And so what you'll find is with fearful avoidance, there are several behaviors that they may elicit as well. One of those things that I haven't put actually on this particular presentation is what we call fawning, where they almost play act and people please because they're not sure how to handle the parent in front of them. If you ever listen to a biography by Will Smith, he talks about fawning and how he would become the jokester in his family in order to try and appease his father who was abusive. So with fearful avoidance, they have this behavior where they're not being true to themselves. They self-abandon and they release their own needs and wants in order to make yours more important, and in the hopes of by doing that they will get a return. It's very similar to what anxious people do, but let's stick to fearful avoidance. They first and foremost, on the left hand side of the column is a positive, on the right hand side is a negative. And once again, I want to say PowerPoint has done me dirty with the placement of things. It looked real good when I didn't have it in this particular system, but hey, let's look at it. On the left hand side, one thing I would say about fearful avoidance that I have noticed by coaching them is that they are great listeners. They are paying attention. They are very hypersensitive to what your needs and your wants are. So if you're somebody who's dating them, you'll find that they are, especially in the very beginning, they're very much in tune with your particular needs and wants. They're listening, they're paying attention, and it's like you are having your own almost therapist in a sense in a relationship, or your own personal assistant who just hears you and gets it done. Number two, they are often wanting very deep connections. And this is actually one of the reasons why that fearful avoidance, I believe, get along with dismissive avoidance in the very early stages, because they are able to create an environment of safety for the dismissive avoidant to really be able to relax and share some of the deepest things they've ever shared in their entire life. That's a video for another day. You can tell I've obviously encountered some fearful avoidance myself. So they create very deep connections because they require deep connections. One thing about fearful avoidance is they do love being able to have intellectual conversations, or conversations that just stimulate the mind. Number three, they are very empathetic because they understand being in environments of chaos and being in environments where their needs were absolutely dismissed. They actually tend to be quite empathetic and tuning into other people's needs. And that's actually probably part of the problem too. And again, going back to what anxious people also very similarly is that because they're in tune sometimes with someone else's emotions, right, and being empathetic, because they self-abandon by meaning putting their needs aside, they tend to tune into yours and take yours as theirs. And that can be a little bit confusing at points in time. And number four is that they look to serve, but they are beautiful and brilliant at really being able to uh, pay attention, like I said, listen, understand, and then really look to be of service for people. Now, this is also a double-edged sword because as much as they want to be of service to people, sometimes they are what we call the glue to friendships. They hold friendships together, but they do that because they want people to be loved and cared about. But then again, they forget their own needs. But again, they are beautiful friends because they can piece people together. Now, that just really depends because fearful avoidance have both the anxious and the avoidant sides. So that's what makes it a little bit more tricky because as much as I said it can be the glue, that's the anxious side. You get fearful avoidance who, too, I like to call are very similar to dismissive avoidance. They are the counselors of their friendship groups. They pay attention, they listen, they hear, and people come to them because they believe they're strong. And they can be because they emotionally are willing to put themselves aside and hear your needs and wants and give you your solutions as well. Fearful avoidance tend to be very good problem solvers. When they're not overwhelmed emotionally, they're very good problem solvers. And so people will come to them and rely on them and rest upon them as well. So let's look at some of the negative behaviors that we may see from the fearful avoidance. One of the things that we will see is what we call hot and cold. And what I love about this is, as I was reading Robert Greene, the book of Art of Seduction, yes, here's my little gem I'm going to add in here, what I noticed when he described what a coquette was. So if you ever haven't researched that, go and research it. It's a beautiful thing. When he said about the coquette, about how the coquette blows hot and cold, I immediately knew that he was talking about the fearful avoidant. What is hot and cold? Well, hot and cold, instinctively by their fearful avoidant, they both want love and are afraid of the love they're going to receive. So what tends to happen is that they end up playing this hot cat and mouse game with people. And it's not because they're trying to necessarily be manipulative. Some people are, but the majority are not trying to be manipulative. It is literally how they feel. One minute they feel very hot, one minute they feel very cold. They feel like they want to be clingy all over you, and the next minute they want to have their distance. Again, remember the unpredictability of the environment that they grew up in and the chaos that they grew up in. They have not learnt the emotional regulation aspect, and sometimes they are overwhelmed by their own emotions, which can make it very complicated. Sometimes they don't know what they're fully feeling because they're not able to identify what some of the feelings and the thoughts are. So again, I mentioned about can be overwhelmed by their own emotions. What tends to happen for fearful avoidance is that in the space of a relationship, whether it's friendships, whether it's family, whether it's a romantic relationship, is that they can be having several thoughts at once and several emotions at once, and it can be quite overstimulating. So when we talk about emotional regulation, we talk about expression, we talk about understanding, and we talk about processing. One of the things I've noticed from coaching fearful avoidance is that it is the processing that becomes very difficult. And the reason why processing becomes difficult is because you have to have built those kind of muscles to be able to process more information. This is where the avoidance side really kicks in because the ability to comprehend, understand, and then identify and take in, and then be able to really see what's going on with you is a very difficult task when it comes to emotions. So when they're overwhelmed, they can go either way. They can go very hot or they can go very, very cold. Number three, hypervigilance for betrayal, rejection, and I believe also abandonment because they carry both the avoidant and the anxious side of things. So their hypervigilance leads them to self-sabotage at points in time because they overlook at certain details and informations within a relationship and they're trying to prove their point right. In fact, all insecure attachments, which is anxious, fearful, avoidant, dismissive, have a level of projection that they put onto other people. And this is why in relationships, they will try to tell you what your behavior is. And if they don't tell you, their actions will tell you that they've already judged what your intention actually was. That's the projection. And that's often the hypervigilance that they carry. Because the core wounds of a fearful avoidant is to do with abandonment, rejection, and betrayal, any behavior that signals that particular wound is now going to be scrutinized very closely. And oftentimes, an action follows after that judgment. Number four is that they struggle with dealing with their own boundaries because as a child, they weren't allowed to necessarily have their boundaries. The parent would bypass those boundaries. The parent would also ignore their boundaries. The parent would be the abuser and the comforter. And so you don't really get the time nor the energy to be able to prepare boundaries as a young child. And if you haven't practiced it as a young child, if you've not been given the ability to do boundaries, guess what? When you become an adult, you're not going to do boundaries very well. And so you'll find that this fearful avoidance don't even know that they don't even realize that they can have boundaries, because it's like, I always just say yes. And one thing I've really heard from fearful avoidance, I call it the voice from the deep, that some, especially those who have also gone through abuse that maybe of a sexual nature, in that respect, is that there's a voice from the deep, which means when someone asks, certain people ask them for a request, whether it's, whether it's money, whether it's even sex, whether it's a favor, it's like there's like a voice from the deep, and it's like it just says yes. They can't say no. They can't seem to say no. And another person described it almost as, they can see danger and they can see fire, but they must walk through it. And it's because, again, the way that they have been living in a space of chaos, this almost becomes familiar as a pattern. And so living in a space of chaos is almost a safe feeling. And because they've not been taught that they're allowed to say no, their response to that situation is to fawn, is to people please, is to do some kind of act to try and get out of the situation. But there is something calling them to that particular place. Now, I think my time has passed, and I was going to do all four, and I realized I'm not going to have the time because I'm going to go way overboard in terms of time. So what we are going to do is going to break each individual video down for each individual attachment style. So I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope that you got some understanding of the fearful avoidant. Next one we'll do is a dismissive avoidant, and then we'll do anxious and secure for you guys as well. So make sure you like, you share, subscribe, and you click on that wonderful bell button for notifications of uploads. Remember, I told you, if you are somebody who's looking for their healing, their growth, and their transformation, maybe you are recognizing some of the patterns of a fearful avoidant, then reach out to me. We're here to coach, help you guys, and we want to see you guys win. All right? So make sure you like, share, subscribe, click on that bell button again once more, and we will see you again very, very soon. Much love. Oh.